Welcome to this presentation, which relates to an event which was given on the 24th of June 2014 by the Project Management Specialist Group of the BCS. And as you can see, the title of the workshop was "Where are our project managers coming from?" And I'll talk about a bit more about what this workshop was about on the next slide. Okay, so first of all, PROMSG is the Project Management Specialist Group within the BCS, and its members tend to be professional IT project managers with a sprinkling of higher education people, very often people who actually teach IT project management within universities. Now, the committee of the specialist group felt there was a need to have some engagement with the IT project management community within higher education. Basically, people who teach project management relating to IT within universities. Now, if we're going to have an engagement, really to have a meeting where basically there was only people from higher education who teach project management would be perhaps quite interesting, but you wouldn't get the discussion, you wouldn't get the interaction, you wouldn't get the exchange of views between education specialists and people who actually do project management in industry. So we wanted to actually try and attract people, both people within universities and outside universities, who had an interest in the training and development of project managers. So this is what the topic was about. So we're saying, well, we need IT project managers. How are they going to be developed, and to what extent will that development be come from things they've done before they actually become project managers? So it could be actually things that they do as if they're studying, say, computing at a university, but also, perhaps more importantly, what actually happens during their kind of work, their career, which allows them to become get the necessary qualification, the necessary skills and competencies needed to become a good IT project manager. Well, first of all, but explain who was involved. You'll see that Bob Hughes gets a rather large amount of attention on this slide, as opposed to Peter Lumley, who's perhaps the most important person who spoke at the workshop. That's just the way things go. I'm Bob Hughes, and I was event coordinator along with Tricia Webb for the day. And my day job at the moment is teaching project management at the University of Brighton. But I'm also the chief examiner for the BCS professional certification qualification, particularly the certificate in project management, although I have to say that this qualification at the moment is pretty moribund. And also I was the editor of the BCS publication, which was written to actually support the foundation certificate in project management, which the BCS administer, and that's been actually relatively successful. Now I was very ably supported by another committee member, Trish Webb, who just retired from being a lecturer in project management at the University of East London, East Anglia. And the key speaker, though, was probably Peter Lumley, who comes from PA Consulting and gave a really good talk on the PA Consulting's sort of process by which they attract people to actually work for PA Consulting, and then also develop them into being decent project managers. So first of all, perhaps we'll give a bit of background and about kind of why there are some issues, particularly these days, about project management training and development. And I think what we've got to do is be aware that over the past couple of decades, there's been actually a gradual change in the way that people become IT project managers. At least that's what I'd argue. So if you go back, say, 20 years, there was a greater tendency 20 years ago, before that, for software development to be in-house, and which meant that your software developers were actually employed by the same organisation as the users. And the ideal in this situation was that the functionality the scope of the functions that the software that was written should have was basically driven by the users. The users said, this is what we want. They perhaps need some guidance from IT specialists, but basically the IT developers should at least try to satisfy the users' very precise requirements. In these endeavours, the IT department within the organisation tends to be the driver in the projects, essentially because they were the people who had most of the skills in IT, perhaps will probably have a monopoly of the skills in IT. Now, in terms of staff development, what tended to happen was that the entry point for new IT staff tended to be as a computer programmer, regardless of where you ended up. The alternative was you could have been a specialist computer operator, who were one of the people who looked after these mainframes in their air-conditioned basements of organisations. And then what would happen is that after a period of time, some computer programmers would move on and become systems analysts. So systems analysts, not always, but very often, came from the ranks of programmers. And the reason for this was that it was kind of felt that systems analysts needed to have insights into how software is structured and built. And then systems analysts, who'd be the people who would do a lot of communicating with the users and would also have to talk to programmers as well, that they would often naturally evolve into having more project management responsibilities. Now, I think if you compare now with 20 years ago, that there are clearly some things which have changed. Now, the first is that there's been an increased use within business applications for off-the-shelf solutions to be built. I don't think it's too controversial if you say that if you need a payroll system, the last thing you want to do these days is to write it yourself, because there are lots of very good and very reliable off-the-shelf payroll packages which you can buy. And what's happened is that these different business applications have been wrapped together in to create comprehensive ranges of business applications which all communicate with each other. And this is where we get ERP systems, and we particularly think of SAP, who for most any business application, SAP will have a standard solution which you can then incorporate into your working processes with a bit of effort. Now, if you're going to use off-the-shelf solutions, one of the things that is almost certain to happen is that users will have to change their way of working to fit the software solution. Remember, going back to when you had in-house software development, the software developers could always write the system especially tailored for the local users. If you're going to have an existing off-the-shelf package, the users will have to compromise and to some extent change their way of working in order to fit the software solution. The other thing, a big change we've got these days, is that generally, when it comes to software development, large organizations will almost certainly offshore software development. In other words, they will get people in somewhere in India or some other low-wage economy to actually do the coding. And this offshoring is part of outsourcing. So the idea is you try and avoid, if possible, employing your own IT specialists unless you really have to. And you use outside resources as and when you need them. Now, what this means to some extent is that the IT department is not as central to business change and IT innovation as it used to be. So, for example, if you implement an ERP system, then the key people may be super users, people who are aware of how current systems work within the organization, and consultants who will be working in conjunction with the supplier of the off-the-shelf solution, the ERP system, to tailor the parameters of this particular solution so it fits the particular local organisation. And I think what this is an example of is that there are now many different entry points that people might take to start on an IT career. You won't always be a software developer to start with. You may go in and you could be working as a database specialist or a support member on a help desk. And the other thing is that if software development is being outsourced, what you're likely to have when you have a project is a kind of two sides to the project. One side, which is the client, what the client has to do in order to change the organisation to fit in with the new IT solution. And you'll have the suppliers who are actually supplying the software products or expertise. So what you may have is actually two project managers, a project manager in the client organisation and another one in the supplier organisation.